Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. And as I'd said last time around, we are leaving aside the D20 Modern Guide, and we're moving along in favor of some other things. One, just to let me cover a couple of different topics, and two, to just give myself a little bit of breathing room as I take a look at how D20 Modern moved away from alignments over towards allegiances and what kind of interesting things that poses for gameplay, as well as the starting occupations, which was definitely a nice attempt at getting some different character elements built into mechanics, although, to varying degrees of success. But most importantly, it gives me a little bit of time to take a look at the different advanced classes and kind of see how they work mechanically. I mean, granted, I've played them, a lot of them before, but still, just taking a look at which ones are mechanically more effective than others is going to take a little bit of time and certainly a little bit of judgment on my part. So, for today, we are going to be covering a topic that's going to be fairly universal towards most fantasy games, and that is running deities. Whether it's actual gods, demigods, demon lords, Asmodeus and the other rulers of the nine hells, or whatever other deities might be out there, just these omnipotent and timeless beings, there's some things that you need to have in mind when you decide to have them play a more active role in your campaign. Certainly, if you have any clerics, paladins, druids, or any other character that draws power from their chosen deity or pantheon of deities, that in and of itself is a representation of having them in the game already. They're there by default to the players. Although not directly, it's indirectly, but that's something we're going to talk about in this video a little bit later on in this video. But the number one thing to bear in mind if you're going to have these beings be antagonists, supporters, whatever role you have in mind for them, the number one thing to bear in mind when it comes to running these beings is that they are playing the long game by default. And that's because, well, centuries are meaningless to them. They go by in the blinks of an eye as far as they're concerned. It's nothing for them to wait. And their plans take generations upon generations of mortal lives in order to come to fruition. And, well, to a certain extent, you could say they come to fruition on a day to day basis. Every time a paladin dedicated to some deity comes out on the successful end of an adventure, well, that's a win for them. But you can also make an argument that even if that paladin falls, that paladin's soul going off to their chosen deity's respective afterlife, whatever realm it is they rule over, that's still a win for a deity. Sure, they don't have a mortal champion out there wandering around anymore, or at least they're down one mortal champion, but that champion's life, their exploits, their numerous adventures and successful adventures at that, spreading the word and power of their deity, and not only that, but their death, that's a potentially martyrdom right there. That's sainthood. That's celebration of this incredible hero of this chosen faith's life. And that example will spread and go out to more people and potentially convert more followers who then may also become clerics, paladins, and the like, and further entrench this deity in whatever world it is that they've decided to make their touch known to. So even the death of a champion can still feed into the larger overall plan of a deity. It's very rare for them to actually lose out in the long run, no matter what happens. It takes some incredible upheavals for for a deity to really truly lose out. Any of the deities, I mean, it's a tricky thing too because being able to conceive of this is basically impossible for us because we're mortal flesh and blood beings, we storytellers. I mean, thinking about the intricate, interconnected ways that all of these things, all these different pieces can move about is, I'd say, impossible. But touching on it somewhat is making it feel like it's there is not all that incredibly well. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. You can't actually think like a deity. I mean, This assumes that you believe deities exist. Whether or not you do, we're not here to discuss that today. That's a whole can of worms we can leave behind on the internet. But the point is, to get into that headspace is difficult, but you can still lay out some intricate plans and plots that make it feel like the deity is omnipotent and it has infinite arrays of plans available. And I'll give you an example here, and we'll stick with the paladin example. Let's say we have a paladin that's dedicated to a good deity. Now we have an evil deity that wants to corrupt that paladin because a story of a tragic fall, paladins fall from grace and fall from the light can be can be one of the ways in which a deity, an evil deity, can deny a good deity that martyr's death. Because of the death of a martyr, this person who becomes sanctified, is an incredibly powerful story, and the evil deity knows this. So the best way to prevent that is to go, oh, look at this horrible terror, this terrible, awful tale of woe and hardship that had befallen this paladin, and let them crestfallen, their faith shaken and shattered. Truly, how can this God, supposed God of righteousness, be powerful at all if they don't even protect the champions that do the most work for them? Look at what's happened now. This champion has now become this awful blackguard, rampaging, raping, pillaging, and burning everything down that they come across. This is an awful tale, and look at the power of this evil, baneful deity that managed to corrupt such a righteous and pure soul. Truly, these are dark times as these champions of light are retreating before the forces of darkness, or just outright joining them. That is a powerful story in and of itself that only seems to strengthen and mystify and build up the reputation of this dark god and their evil faith. And so, to do this, of course, the dark god will throw challenges at the paladin. But it's not enough to just throw evil at them. You have to twist it in some way. Let's say this paladin comes from a family that has moral dubiousness to it. Maybe not necessarily evil, but not good and righteous. But now there's this righteous figure. This member of their family has chosen to step firmly into the light, into righteousness. So the dark god can use the situation to their advantage. Say, because this paladin's family is already in a morally gray area, they can make it easier for them to slip down towards a path of evil, and then set the family against the paladin. And in doing so, the paladin ends up put in a position where they're forced to defend themselves against their own family, potentially even killing them. And if they kill them, although they acted in self-defense, if your players are playing a paladin properly, a mortal being properly, maybe, they're saddened by the loss and having to end a family member by their own hands, by their own power, but they're put in a position with no choice. What other choice did they have? Well, and it keeps going and it keeps happening. They keep having to enact violence against family members who are turning on them, corrupted by darkness perhaps, but still, it's family. And then the dark god can confront them, or have somebody, one of their agents, confront them on their behalf and just tell them, well, look at this. I mean, you really think you're all that righteous? Look what you've done. You've slaughtered your own family. Yes, they attacked you, but aren't you supposed to be this high, mighty paladin in this lofty position and ideals? You couldn't have saved them? You couldn't have made the effort to use any of the funds from your many adventures to try to bring them back, or beg somebody within the church? You're a powerful paladin with highly esteemed by your peers. You couldn't have begged and prostrated yourself before them and asked them to bring even some of your family back, some of your siblings, one of your uncles, your parents, your aunt, one of your aunts, and just confront them with this harsh reality. Well, not confronting them with a harsh reality that they've put into a particular perspective, and using it to beat, corner, and berate them. And that's a situation where you can leave the player feeling like, yeah, maybe that wasn't the wisest decision. Maybe I am going down this path of evil. And placing that doubt there, if the player is doing a good job role playing, they can play the paladin having doubts, and that's where, in those doubts, that creates those cracks in which the deity can wiggle their way in and potentially maybe not drop them immediately down to evil, but they go from being lawful good to lawful neutral. And then once they're lawful neutral, well, they're starting to lose the graces of this righteous, lawful good deity. And they're a little bit harsher, a little bit sterner, a little bit meaner. And it just moves further down and down and down. But let's say that the paladin did not end up in a position where they had to kill their family members, or even all of them. Ended up in a position where they only had to kill a very minimal number of them. Well, the an agent of a dark god can still present that in a very harsh light, and even then, lying is still an option. As long as they can be convincing enough, rolling high persuasion checks, diplomacy, whatever the situation may call for, as long as they plant that seed of doubt in their minds and get them to a point where, well, you're condemned, nobody is going to trust you, you turned on your own family, you have no other option left but us. So come on over. We will accept you for who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done before. Look, I mean, you've maimed family, you've turned on friends, or the friends that had turned their backs on you, you didn't show them mercy. You Sure, you left them alive, but you cut them to ribbons, you bludgeoned them, you have driven them into the dirt, you've shamed them thoroughly, beyond what was necessary. Come join us. We'll accept you for who you are. There is no need to be forgiven here. We will embrace wholly what you are, and there will be no shame in that. You can even turn this around on those who would point their fingers at you and accuse you of being foul, when really you were put in a position where you had no other options. We understand that. Come over here, join us. There is no shame over here in the dark. And all it takes from that point on, although maybe the paladin has not actually sinned or transgressed against their deity, as long as they believe they have, if they go ahead and just make that pact and say, all right, I'm coming over, I'm joining you now, that dedication, that verbal assent, is all it takes for them to step away from their lawful good deity and start down pretty fast on that path towards lawful evil, neutral evil, whatever spectrum of evil over there. That can move them pretty quickly. All it takes is just opening up and saying, okay, I'm going to allow this dark being into my heart now. I am going to dedicate myself to this God. And bam, right there. That's all that takes. And that really all they had to do was just create a situation where things got uncomfortable, tense, put pressure on the paladin, planted those seeds of doubt and uncertainty, and starting to shake their faith. Their power from their deity is not unbroken, but that breaking their belief is what's required in that instance. So, even though things did not quite go to plan, the paladin did not start taking darker and darker measures, putting a final end to the opponents being flung at them. Even though they did show some mercies and spared lives, they can still have backup plans, put things in the right context, put things in a bad light, and really start to put even more doubts into the character's mind. Granted, again, this assumes that you are playing with players who will do this kind of role playing, which, certainly it's quite fun when they do. But Another thing you can do, if the players aren't quite at that point, or you don't want to put the player specifically through that, you can have this happen with an NPC that's associated with the players, and still make the touch of these different deities feel that much more real. And that in of itself can be an interesting quest right there, an important mission for the players, trying to save their friend from corruption, or if they do fall into corruption, trying to bring them back from it. And think about how powerful that scene was. I mean, you know, the Star Wars movies have not aged entirely well, but they're still fantastic movies. I mean, clearly, big fan right over here. But how powerful is that scene when Luke brings Darth Vader back from the dark side of the Force? He turns on the Emperor and hurls him down into the reactor of the second Death Star, or at least I think it's a reactor. Anyways, he throws the Emperor to his death, comes back to the light side of the Force, and it's because somebody believed in him enough to reach out to him, even as they were about to die. Well, really, Luke was about to die. He didn't have a whole lot of choice but to reach out to his father in order to try to be saved. But that moment was enough to bring him back. And that can be a very powerful story in and of itself, which is another reason why you should leverage these deities, albeit with definitely with a lot of care and consideration, however. And that's the second thing I wanted to throw out here. When it comes to deities, there has to be a lot of care and consideration, not just because they are omnipotent beings and are timeless and know everything and have seen everything, in relative context compared to mortals. They've seen so much more and experienced so much more, but they cannot move carelessly, and they cannot move with force, with a great deal of force. And by force, I mean they can't commit a lot of power to any one area, because if they do, that necessitates a response from other deities. Think about what happened in World War One. I mean, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand and his wife was an awful travesty. But that was in Sarajevo. That would have been a very minor conflict had the Austrians just gone ahead and moved forward and attack and retaliated quickly. It would have been a minor conflict, a minor skirmish, done and over with, really quick. But because they started building up their forces and they stalled, but they were still trying to build up, but they weren't sure what to do, so they reached out to Germany, got Germany involved, which were their allies, and Germany said, yeah, we'll back you 100%. Other people started cluing into what was happening. Russia started mobilizing their forces, so the French had to mobilize, so the British had to mobilize. If one god is beginning to move a bit more power and invest more time and effort into something, that's going to necessitate other deities start moving as well. Not only that, but if they overcommit to one area, that can leave them vulnerable in other places that other deities can take advantage of. So, much like nations, gods, demigods, and the like have to move with care. They can't just move carelessly. You can make an exception for this with demons, for example, and other chaotic evil deities drawing out of the abyss, saying they essentially have infinite numbers as far as anybody else is concerned, so they can kind of get away with moving recklessly. Plus, it just fits with chaotic evil. But even still, your demon lords, your Baelors, all Meriliths, all these different demonic creatures with higher intelligence scores are going to understand that they have to have subtlety from time to time, that they have to move with some precision. And thus, they are going to move with care, or at least these more powerful forces, especially when you're talking about chaotic elements, will move with some measure of care and subtlety. There will be a breaking point where the dam just bursts and floods of violence just wash out from the abyss, or the chaotic good forces decide, yeah, we're just going to sweep down like a driving rain at the forefront of a whirlwind. We're going to plow through everything and slice these evil monstrosities apart. but there still is going to be a great deal of care, and hence it's why you don't typically have a lot of deities directly intervening on different events. And when it does happen, when a deity does decide to move directly, it's going to require and necessitate and just basically guarantee response from other deities because, well, they have to. It's like the nuclear arms race during the Cold War. We set up a missile silos in Turkey, so they start building. So Russia starts trying to build up in Cuba or in any other regions where they had a great deal of influence. You get the idea. Response necessitates response, and deities are no exception to this particular matter, which again comes back to why they move indirectly and have such intricate plans and plots. Intricate plans and plots are harder to, well, they're not necessarily harder to break, because deities' plans involve worlds, continents, and span centuries. They're harder to break because they're harder to perceive, at least for mortals. And for other deities, it's harder to kind of break such large bases. You have to chip away and erode things bit by bit, hence why champions like paladins and clerics and the like tend to be really useful pawns. Well, I say pawns, but you get the idea. You have to plan and think things out ahead of time, and having just backup plan after backup plan after backup plan can be helpful. So bear that in mind. Definitely give things a lot of thought when you're including deities and just think, okay, this is what I want to have happen. This is the deity's end goal. We have a good paladin, they need to become evil. That's this evil god's goal. How do we get them there? Put them in situations where they have to make difficult choices. If it's a morally dubious choice where there's no good answer, fantastic. It doesn't matter that their deity will understand you were put in a bad situation. And even better if it's a deity that's inflexible and says, no, you should have just had the foresight to avoid that altogether. You were supposed to have a better sense than that. You messed up. So much the better. But even if it's a more forgiving deity that understands, hey, tough choice, man, I get it. Doesn't matter. Just put them in a situation where the character is going to be troubled by the fact that they had to make that choice and that they were able to make that choice. And then just keep worming away at that, keep working at that, keep putting them in positions where they have to make where the good solutions either don't exist or are difficult to see or difficult to pull off, even if they can't see it. And even if they make the good decision, just play out the fact that, hey, you put yourself in this position where, what are you doing? A paladin should know better, and plant those seeds of doubt in their mind. And even if things work out in a way that the players pull off things marvelously and spectacularly, they come through with relatively still bright and shiny morality and at the end of it all. The agents of dark gods have free reign to lie, cheat, steal, put things in the worst light possible, and as much as it is tricking the character, you are wanting to trick the player into thinking, yeah, maybe, and get them into that position to role play out where they are falling from grace. Potentially, anyways. If the players still manage to get some good rolls and even can role play through and justify it, or if their friends, the friends of this particular character, decide that they're going to step up and help keep their friend from falling, well, then so much the better. You've created a situation where everybody's actively engaging in this role play, where a friend, a normally righteous, level-headed friend, is about to make a poor decision, and their friends, maybe even the dubious rogue, is like, nah, man, come on. I mean, if it were me, sure, I could see it, but you, come on. Maybe you've done wrong, but you've not nearly done as much wrong as me, and I'm not about to step over to that side either. Lots of different things, lots of different possibilities. Depends on the party composition, but including deities can add a lot of fun, but you definitely need to think things out, not because it's dangerous throwing in deities, but because they need to feel like they're omnipresent beings. omnipresent beings with backup plan after backup plan after backup plan. But that's just one man's thoughts. I do call myself the master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, but really, I can't plan for everything, much as I might try to. I do the best I can, though, and I hope to help you do the best you can as well. If you enjoyed today's video, go on down there and hit the like button, or leave a comment and let me know what you thought. Good or bad, I'm more than happy to engage in the conversation. And if you did enjoy today's video, well, there's going to be 2 more over here popping up that maybe you'll enjoy as well. Or if this hasn't been your first stop so far, well then go on down there, hit the subscribe button. Obviously you must like something if you've been sticking around for a couple of videos. So, with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so much for your time, and you have yourselves a good night.